Hey, friends. Welcome to The Way of Valor. I am your host, Angie Taylor, and it is an honor to be with you today. Congratulations to you guys for listening to this podcast, because today will not disappoint you. Today will be one of those podcasts that you're better at the end of it because you heard it. This guy, I think I met Tyler like 3 or 4 months ago, maybe, for the very first time. And day one that I met him, I was like, this guy has an anointing of leadership on his life. And I knew I needed to get him on the podcast. So Dr. Tyler Cook, welcome to The Way of Valor. We're super excited you're here.
Thanks so much, Angie, for welcoming me. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So Dr. Cook, or Tyler, because we're buddies, but he is a principal in Pennsylvania. He's speaking at leadership engagements for the school system and the public school system, and coaching leaders and teachers on education. He's written a book, and this is why I brought you on, Tyler, because I'm really excited to talk about your book. It's called Building Authenticity, a Blueprint for Leadership Inside. And first of all, I love the title, but tell us more, unpack your book for us.
I would love to. And Angie, this book was written for everyone. And it's under the premise that there is a leader inside of each one of us. And our world needs healthy leaders. We need leaders who are going to live and lead with the value system of heaven. And we are a leader no matter where we are in our life, because if you have influence, you're a leader. It's not simply a matter of title. Whether you're a stay-at-home mom or you're a teacher or you work for an insurance company, you have influence. And we know that leadership matters, but authentic leadership matters, because who you are is ultimately how you lead. So this book breaks down and unpacks the tenets of authenticity. It's research-based. I had the privilege of working through my doctoral dissertation on authentic leadership. So it's grounded in true research. And we talk about things like living and leading from our core values, from living relationally transparent, building healthy support systems into our life, welcoming feedback, fostering self-awareness, and ultimately our most important leadership, which is inside the front doors of our home.
Yeah, so good, Tyler. I'm curious though, because as a leader, and you're a leader in your school with teachers and everything, it is very easy to get cynical and start building walls, right? And you also know the right thing to say. Once you've led for so long, you know what you need to say. You know what the right thing to say here is. Even though there are days I want to go kick and scream and throw a tantrum on my floor. I'm curious, how do you balance that and blend that with being really authentic and still leading well?
Yeah, so I love the phrase, love first, lead second. And Angie, people are messy. We're messy. Yeah. And it's easy to talk about, the kids that we have come into our schools, and they come from different backgrounds, and they have different areas where, they have, pain in their life and lack of support. And so even when you're working with adults, it's those same kids 20 or 30 years later that still need that same love. And so when we love first and lead second, when we love through the lens of seeing people how the Lord sees them, seeing the gold inside of them, it creates a value system inside of us that sees the worth of the people that we lead. And so are there hard days? Absolutely. But when you understand that when you're a leader, you have a unique access point to speak into people's lives that you wouldn't normally have. You have the opportunity to put a mirror in front of them so that they can see who they really are. Everything changes.
Yeah, that's so good. And you've already talked about this a little bit, but you work in the public school system,
right?
Do. And so I'm curious. That is number one. We need great Christian leaders in the public school system. So thank you. But how are you navigating the system with the strategies of heaven, with the concepts from heaven into your schools? What does that look like?
Great question. Well, Angie, our testimony it's our life on display. And every person in my building, the 50 plus faculty and staff that I have in my school, there is no question of my value system. And it's so important as leaders that every decision that we make comes from our core values. And I always say, when the going gets tough, you can either do the easy thing or you can do the right thing. And, I believe that when we establish what those values are that we'll live and lead by, when we come up against a crossroads, we're better equipped to stand firm in those things. And just like when we parent, when we build that value system into our children, when they will inevitably come up against a challenge or come up against this juxtaposition that would maybe challenge their faith, they're better grounded to be able to stand firm in who they really are. And so it's important to me that every decision that I make inside of the school, every relationship that I cultivate and that I build, all comes from my values. And it's so important that each person understands and knows who I am in that way. And I'll tell you why too, because leading a school, I'm not going to be there for every decision that's made. And I really truly want to empower the people that I lead. And so when your value system is so known in the people that you lead, I want people to have to make a decision without me there and know what Tyler would do. I want them to be able to say, you know what, this is what Tyler's response would be. We know this is the right thing to do in this regard.
Yeah, that's really funny because frankly, if they make a decision thinking it was your response, you're like, that might be more about me. I'm curious, Tyler, and because to be an authentic leader, you have to be self-aware. And that's one of the things that I've discovered is really challenging to help both parents and, or adults through, and even kids, is helping people lean into that, being self-aware enough so they can be authentic, because people are confusing authenticity with drama right now.
Oh,
I'm open about my drama. I'm open about my drama. I'm authentic.
Yes, I'm so glad that you said that, because we talk about that early on in the book, that authenticity has gotten a bad rap because it's been misappropriated, that I don't have a filter, that I speak my mind, that I'm being, quote, true to myself. But in fact, cultivating authenticity is about moving the needle toward becoming your best self, the person you desire to be, that ideal self. And it's not permission to compromise those values. It's not permission to be someone who lacks integrity or character. It's in fact just the opposite. It's about raising the bar and raising the standard so that I live and lead in a way that adds value to people, that serves well, that loves well the people around us.
So how do you draw them into that piece of self-awareness when they seem to be missing that? I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah. Well, it may sound a little cliche, but I love the visual of thinking about the dashboard of your car. And I stand in front of my faculty and staff regularly. We spend time fostering self-awareness, cultivating self-reflection, and being really aware of those indicators that are flashing on our dashboard. You wouldn't hop into a vehicle and put electrical tape over your dashboard and decide to drive across the country over the course of 9 months, right? You may get a ways and be successful, but eventually you're going to get burned out. You're going to be stretched thin. You are going to become cynical or bitter or whatever that would be. And so part of that, there's two phrases that I love to use, and I will credit Jenna Zint and Aaron Zint from Marriage Lab podcast. They've shared some of these things about staying current with ourselves. Cultivating self-awareness is about staying current with our emotions and how things land on us. And oftentimes as leaders and as people, life moves by very quickly. And it's easy to put rocks in our backpack and not process through things. And then eventually we find ourselves with disproportionate responses to situations that really wouldn't warrant such a thing. And another phrase that I use is getting curious, like getting curious with, why did I respond that way? And for example, I'll say me and my wife in our home, maybe Stacy, my wife, says something and I have a disproportionate response inside of me that doesn't really fit, because 95 out of 100 times it's usually something inside of me. And so I'll say, I'm going to get really curious about that. Why that tinged inside of me in that way. And the willingness to stay current it's a vulnerable thing, It takes self-discipline. It oftentimes requires us to maybe clean up relational messes, but it keeps our heart really healthy so that we can ultimately give our best to the people in our life that matter most.
That is so good and so important, because I do think when we look at leading others, we often are not leading ourselves.
So good.
And you'll never be effective in, it's easy to assign blame to others and not recognizing the part you play in it. So that's such a valuable thing. I'm curious, when you're working with your students on this issue, because we have a lot of parents that listen to us, how are you helping your students gain this piece?
So the self-aware, are you talking about the self-awareness and that
Yes.
self-reflection
Yes.
aspect? Yeah. And so much of life and so much of what we've even learned as adults comes from using teachable moments. And it's easy to talk theory or philosophy to give advice to kids of when the rubber meets the road or when this will happen. But I believe life is the greatest teacher. And when you have healthy support systems built around kids, there are times we'll have students in my office where rather than telling them all of the things that they're not, I remind them who they really are. And we spend time reflecting. And as I used this analogy earlier, putting a mirror in front of them and essentially reminding them of who God's really created them to be, and allowing them to make the connections of how did this decision work out for me? What is the byproduct of this? And there's a standard that I know that I can live by, and I'm going to take the steps to get there. And so I try to be very methodical as I'm working through these things with students, because if you don't build these skills and capacity in kids now, we're going to be playing a lot of catch up later on in life. And I'm reminded, if I could just say, I'm reminded of the Proverbs in Proverbs 22:6 of train your child in the way they should go and they will not depart from it. Well, as a parent, as a principal, it's not just about telling our kids all the things that they shouldn't do. It's training them in the way they should go. So when they end up at that place, they know what to do.
Yeah, really good. We do often forget with our kids that it's our job to coach them and bring tools to them. Sometimes we're just annoyed with childish behavior. But that's why they need parents. So let's lean over into the social emotional learning, otherwise known as SEL, at schools. And when it first started hitting the scene, when we first started talking about it as educators, I was like, oh, self-regulation is so important. And so I'm curious, Tyler, your thoughts on where is it good and where is it leading us in a dangerous place? Help parents understand this.
Yeah, what a great question. I think social emotional learning can have high, tremendous value depending on the voice that's sharing it, right? It's one of those double-edged swords that it can be a powerful thing inside of your home as a parent, right? When you're instilling your family values. Unfortunately, it's been filled with mixture in many ways. And I think it's been utilized at times in education as a vehicle for other messages that don't align with the values of many families. And so my encouragement for families is have those conversations with your kids. You are ultimately the ones charged by God with the beautiful gift of your children to steward and be faithful with. So ensure that you're having honest, open conversations that's building the value system of your family and instilling that into your kids. Because I want to ensure, so I have 3 sons, 11, 9, and 7, and a little girl who's 4. I want them to get information from their mom and dad of who they are to be and the values that we believe in, that which is ultimately heaven, kingdom values.
my brain is buzzing with so many comments off of what you just said. It was so good. I think it's important for people to understand with that the SEL curriculum out there is in a lot of ways it was intended to help students self-regulate, self-reflect. Where it falls short is bringing back that ultimate vision, and to your point, those core values of, okay, let's acknowledge the emotion, but let's move back into logic and reason for how we can produce the future that we're hoping for.
Yeah.
And that seems in my mind to be where the divide is we acknowledge the emotions and then we leave them in them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And our responsibility as parents is to help build identity in our kids. We ask our kids questions like, what does God say about that?
Yeah.
Or, yeah, that's really hard. Well, who does God say you are, though? Did God say that about you? And
Good.
it's important that we have empathy with our kids and allow them to feel their emotions and have space.
Yes.
But we want to ensure that we recalibrate them back to truth. We recalibrate them back to the message that the Father speaks, that He is a good God, He's a good Father, that He's created them fearfully and wonderfully, and help align them to the identity that God's created them in.
Yeah, I really appreciate that because, yes, kids need to be allowed to feel their emotions, acknowledge, recognize their emotions, that self-awareness piece, but we don't let our emotions lead us in our decision making, because that's going to go very badly for a lot of people if we do that. And that's frankly what we see in our country today, is a lot of people with emotional trigger responses to one another. And I love, I'll go back to that lead with, or love first, lead second, is such a brilliant, it's exactly what we were just talking about, is let's that emotional piece first. We're going to handle and understand those emotions and validate, here's your experience, is your experience, but now let's lead you from that. And that's such a beautiful thought. One thing that you've said is you keep referring to core values and coming back to values. And Tyler, you and I both know a lot of families have not thought about what are the values that guide this home. And I'd love for you to speak to why is that important, and how should a family go about doing that?
Yeah, well, our value system, I mean, it's our North Star, it's our compass. And there's ultimately going to be times in life that knock us off course, but I like to refer to them as the guardrails, the lens through which we make decisions. And whether or not as a family or as a person you've taken the time to identify your values, you have them. Because they're the things that frame the decisions that you make. And really, it's oftentimes the early life experiences that we have, the mentors in our life, the influential people in our life growing up, that help instill these things inside of us. And so I would encourage families to begin to put language around that, to put down on paper, like, who are we? What do we do? How do we show up for each other? What is important in our life? What is the vision that we have for our life? And how are we going to get there? It's important that as families that we allow our children to even experience, and sometimes this can be controversial, but it's important that our kids experience failure. They understand that there are trials and there are hardships. And so when you build the value system also around, when you come up against an obstacle in life, how will you respond? How will we come together as a family? How will we unite in prayer to trust God to be our provision or our supply or meet our very need? When that becomes the language of your home, your voice stays with your kids when you are not there. And the final thing I'll say about that is this: who we are in our families The legacy that we leave is not so much going to be in what we say and tell our kids. It's what our kids see us doing.
Sure.
Our life by example is what our kids are going to remember. So we need to ensure that we don't just talk the talk as parents, but we also walk the walk.
Yeah, that is so good. And what are you finding as a principal? What are you finding that this is your fair chance to tell the parents all the things that you've been wanting to say without calling them out by name? what, what would you love to say, and how would you love to coach them?
I would say focus on relationships, build relationships, meaningful relationships with your kids, connect with them in ways that they enjoy to be connected with. Ensure that you're present when they're with you. Let them know. I always say, wherever you are, be all there. And I'm talking to myself, Angie, as a dad who comes home and has 4 kids running around excited to see me. I know there will be a point when my kids are older teenagers. They probably won't be running into my arms the same way. They'll probably put my back out of place if they're 17 and running into my arms. But right now they are. So it's important that when I walk into my home, I set my phone down up on the shelf and I don't look at it. I'm there. I'm present. And those relationships build security. It builds safety with our kids. And coupled with that, our kids are messy. Kids will mess up. And it's so important that we build a culture in our homes that when our kids mess up, we want them to run to us, not away from us. And so our response to our kids, it really, really matters. And when Elijah or Judah or Noah ultimately breaks the lamp because they throw a ball or that, whatever that would be, I don't want them to hide from dad. I want them to come running to dad. And so my advice to parents would be, cultivate relationships. It's easy to parent out of fear. It's easy to parent out of maybe the lack of what we feel like we didn't get, but look to the Lord. Look at the way the Father loves us, and try to just be a pass through. Try to be a conduit of when we lean into the Lord and understand that there's grace. His mercy is new every day, but He also disciplines those that He loves. Be a conduit like that for our children.
Whew. So much goodness there. I feel like you should go back and re-listen to that because as a fellow principal, school administrator, I echo that. We definitely in our schools can very readily tell the kids whose parents have been very engaged with them and whose parents are absent. You can see it in the behaviors and the way your kids are showing up in the world, and it makes such a profound difference. Final thing, and then we're going to make sure we find out how to get your book. But I like this question. I haven't even talked to you about this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. How would you recommend parents respond to kids and their grades?
How would I recommend parents respond to kids in their grades? So an example being they come home with grades not living up to their potential.
Sure. Let's say a kid comes home, he has 2 A's, a C, and an F on the report card.
Yeah.
As a parent, what would you love to see a parent respond to that?
I think it's easy as a parent to do more telling than question asking, to do more assuming than gathering information. And so I would say to a parent, if you have a child that comes home with a grade that is less than ideal or you feel like is less than potential, to not be a judge, but to be a scientist. To look for the reasons why, to ask questions to understand, not ask questions to be the jury. Because oftentimes our children will be far more honest and open with us if they know they have a place and a space to process through some of those things. Maybe they're struggling. Maybe they didn't turn their homework in a few times and never told you. But either way, you want to be able to be a bridge where they feel like they can cross any time to be open, because that's going to translate. The little things like that will translate to the bigger things later on in life. And so when our kids feel like we can have open dialogue and engage when they're not living up to their potential for something as potentially insignificant as a grade on a report card, they're going to be able to come to us for the bigger things later on in life. So to summarize it, don't be a judge, be a scientist.
I love that. I'm going to use that. I'm going to borrow that. I'll give you credit.
That is, well, that's also Jenna and Aaron Zint on the Marriage Lab podcast.
I'm gonna have to go. I'm gonna have to go listen to them now.
They're amazing.
You quoted them twice, and I'm like, those are great. Those are great.
Well, and really, I'll say this real quick about them. It's so much about processing through our emotions and being able to bring whole healthy selves together in marriage. It ultimately translates to our kids. It ultimately translates to other relationships, because it's about cultivating the very best self that we can possibly do. And it's a daily job, right? Like you said earlier, leadership starts from within. Everything that we do is a byproduct of how well we're willing to take care of ourselves, Angie.
Oh, so good. Which brings us right back to your book. Such a great segue to go right back to your book, because that's exactly what you're helping people do in your book. And so tell us how we can get our hands on your book, and tell us where we can follow you on social media, because I know you have great posts on social media. We'd love to hear more.
Oh, thank you. So the book is titled Building Authenticity, a Blueprint for the Leader Inside You. I wrote it along with a good friend of mine, Todd Nesloni, who's in education and does a tremendous amount of speaking and coaching. And we had some conversation last year and began sharing our vision for some of these ways we want to help build whole, healthy leaders. And so, this book was birthed out of it. My tag for all social media is Dr. Tyler Cook. So Dr. Tyler Cook. That's for Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. My website is also drtylercook.com.
There you go.
And the book is available on Amazon.
That's awesome. And hey guys, we will put that in the show notes so you can go check it out, give him a follow, give him a shout out if you found this helpful today. Tyler, it's been such a pleasure to have your time today. And man, you dropped so many good things on us. It's been an honor to have you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. And I'd just love to say, Angie, thank you for answering the call with Valor, for creating a place for students to grow in their God-given calling, and you cultivating that in a way that really has gone against the grain in so many facets. But you've said yes, and you're mobilizing a whole generation of kids that are really going to change the world. So thank you, Angie.
Absolutely. It's exciting to see what we're going to do together someday.
That's right.
We're dreaming about that. All right, guys, thanks for listening. If you found this helpful, make sure you share it out with a friend and give it a 5-star review. That's the way we get this information out and get families healthy. Blessings on your day, and thanks for listening.